can be celebrated
the end
on
justifies
the
the end
internet. Yeah.
justifies the means.
Exactly.
You know, and you've thrown in the spirituality of it. I mean, somewhere in there, while you were making your
Yeah.
commentary, you talked about the
Mm.
spirituality of it. But I see
Yeah,
how
I
you've
think.
hammered on the psychoanalysis of the entire, you know, of this trend, as it were. You know, and that's something I'd
Mm,
like for us to zero into. That's your area of discipline. I know you're not a
yeah.
forensic anthropologist or criminologist, but of course, by the nature of your discipline, I sense that you might be familiar with discerning, you know, the core behavioral profile of a perpetrator, or perpetrators, I should say, of these insane practices that we see play out. So, like I did say, you know, there is a WAP spirituality attached to this whole issue. And, you know, of course,
Mhm.
there are some who weaponize, you know, traditional belief and say that's where they are getting, you know, this whole mythology of ritual powers to be able to give you wealth. But that's not, you're not a diviner here or anything. But I would like for you to speak to the profile. I would like for you to speak to the psychoanalysis, you know, of some of these happenings. Put that against the profile of perpetrators, you know. What is the makeup, or what is the psychological makeup of a perpetrator? Because beyond the issue of poverty, I mean, we know for a fact now that some of these issues might be beyond the issue of poverty. We still see people who ordinarily should be contented, I beg your pardon, still caught up in this circle. I'm talking about people who are educated, schooled and read,
Yeah.
people who are
Yeah.
wealthy, you know, from well-to-do families, people who are not more than even okay, you know, still getting caught up in this whole circle. So what is the psychoanalysis of this whole happening? What can be the rationale for someone like me, probably, you know, who is schooled, well-read, educated, getting involved in all of this, someone who is from a well-to-do family, getting involved from this. So it goes beyond the issue of poverty.
Mm. Yeah. All right. I'll touch a bit on the spiritual aspect, which also has a psychological effect as well. So, I mean, spiritually, people who are involved in ritual killings uh, get into it because they want to acquire power. They also want to acquire wealth and influence. So these are usually the driving factors. So the one thing is power. So sometimes the power could be that power of being able to do things without anyone questioning you, being able to influence things and become influential in the society. So this drive can actually help push people who get into ritual killing to go further, because the idea is that certain body parts uh, have certain spiritual powers. And you know, when it comes to issues of spirituality, they are a bit very difficult to convince. Like the guy who feels that if I go out with a bomb and I get exploded where there are lots of people, then I'm going to make heaven, or I'm going to get this kind of reward, wherever it is. The idea that there is actually a spiritual benefit, a benefit that is even beyond his own reach. You know, as human beings, we're always striving for thing that is above us, you know, the belief that there's some higher power we can actually attain. So, you know, the idea that, you know, if we attain a certain level of spirituality, then we are able to influence things, become maybe, let's say, invincible, like we would not be able to, we could do things without people questioning us. Some even think that if you get this kind of power, then even if you are on the wrong side, the police will see you and they will not know, they will not be able to get at you, and all of those kind of thinking. So this idea push people, you know, and you know, power is something that people have always strived for over
True.
time. Power has been a driving force for many people since time immemorial. So they keep going for it because uh, the the people who bring them into it have assured them of this degree of power and influence and wealth coming. And then our society has a point where nothing else seems to matter except you make money. So you could be a professor, but nobody really cares how long about that. You know, somebody comes around who is a 17-year-old boy, and goes around with big cars, and then everybody is calling them big names, coupled with the fact the quest for money and influence and power. There's also the part where they have become very vicious that they don't care because the drug part has also come in. So there's also a surge in the use of psychoactive drugs, which kind of alters their sensation and perception. So they don't really care. Human lives don't matter to someone who is so high on a combination of all the drugs you can think of. So they can go as far as cutting, killing somebody, and not just stopping there, using all the necessary tools to butcher them and all of that, as if it's some animal. When people do this, that they are actually not themselves. They are under the influence of some very strong psychoactive drugs, which now alters their sense of reality. And as such, they could kill, butcher, and do everything. And then pushed by the zeal to make money and impress their peers, and sometimes even impress their families, and acquire chieftaincy titles that nobody would even ask them about. So they are ready to do anything